in the Philippines, we do have our amazing foremothers or feminists who did their best to fight for the law, like the Magna Carta of Women, that really pushes for women's role in nation building and so on, and other laws that came after it, like the reproductive health and law. But I think one thing we need to recognize, actually two things, is that one, the patriarchal system is deeply rooted. Meaning to say that at the social, political, and economic level, although it's not as apparent as the illustrations in other Southeast Asian, it is deeply felt by a lot of women, although not recognized as a patriarchal problem. Sometimes they view it as a moral failure or just a failure in general, which I'll get back to later. But the second thing is that change should be sustained, meaning to say, even if we do a lot of laws and programs that are for women, when it is not sustained by a democracy that protects it, it can take 3 steps back even if you move 1 step forward.
You're listening to Drawing on Hope, where we talk to inspiring people who will paint for us their vision of a better world. I'm Elbert, and I'm co-founder of Pushpin, a social impact creative agency that uses drawings and stories to help make things make sense. We have a special co-host today. Jen, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jen, and I currently co-lead the process of designing a rapid response ecosystem for the Philippine network of forging intersectional feminist futures.
Today, our guest is Ayla Potestades, Co-Executive Director of BAI Inc. and National Co-Convener of the Philippine Anti-Discrimination Alliance of Youth Leaders. She's part of various gender transformative programs focused on women's political participation and decision-making, economic empowerment, climate justice, and creative industries. Let's jump right into the conversation.
Since technically we are non-partisan, pero we try to help as much as possible yung fellows namin in campaigning. So we organize training for young people sa area nila. Mas ganun yung level na ginagawa namin. So sa March, medyo ganun yung atake.
Okay. And walang voter education as part of your
Mas kasi yung approach namin, value formation. Tapos eventually, sana malink din siya. Like, there are mentions, pero mas value-based yung first focus namin.
Sobrang foundational na pagtatanim yan. Grabe. Okay.
Continuous engagement.
What's the cause that's driving you to actively work in these areas?
Well, with BAI, it's an organization, diba, for women's political empowerment or uplifting them and empowering them to be capacitated in the space of decision-making. And Pantay, in the same breath, is about recognizing the full human rights of LGBTQIA plus youth. So the thing they have in common is they're both entrenched in the system of the patriarchy, basically how decisions, resources, access, and control to said resources are allocated based sa desisyon ng kalalakihan and the system that drives that, right? Like yung mga idea ng ano ba ng pagiging lalaki, pagiging tatay, which all defines what it is for LGBTQ individuals. In the same breath, relational to women, ano ba yung role nila sa buhay na yun. So, yun siya, hindi siya nagkakalayo, isa lang yung kalaban, kaya dikit yung laban din.
What's the personal experience or moment that made you passionate about this issue?
So I keep telling this in all of the talks that I do, especially with the young women, is that I was raised by a single mother. So the idea of a strong woman wasn't far off. But it's recognizing that yun nga, the system has never been easy for those who don't fit the model of a nuclear family. And there are so many things that were inaccessible to her that it was very apparent from the onset that it was a struggle to be a woman, not to mention raising 3 children. So I saw it all, diba? Like the pressures of marrying again for her, the pressures of having to raise a daughter while protecting her, not getting married for the sake of that, fighting for her life, for her job. So it was difficult for her, and through her nakita ko din, I saw the strength that she had and the potential and capacity of each woman I see, because I see her in every single one of them. So that's really what drives me. And sometimes it's a little bit of spite. Char. I'm so angry. Like, what do you mean? I can't wear normal clothes without being objectified. Like, I can't fall in love with the person I love because that's what other people tell me. So sometimes it's just anger. But recognizing that that anger needs to be channeled into something meaningful and transformative for those you love and for those you somewhat hate.
So I'm interested in learning more about Angat Bai. Like, if you could share with us a success story from Angat Bai that demonstrates the power of women in leadership.
Mm-hmm. Um, okay. So one thing about Bai that I really want to characterize is that it's very collective, and the change that occurs is not just because of Bai as an organization but Bai as a movement and as a community. So although we do provide training, we capacitate, the change happens when there's a space that provides for that kind of change. It's caring, it's understanding, it's non-judgmental, it's non-hierarchical, and all of those kinds of feminist values and framings. Um, with that being said, I'm extremely proud and honored to be in the space of women leaders who really took the time to be reflexive about themselves and reflective, because it's not easy, right? Like being raised as a politician or growing up as a leader is difficult in the Philippines because you're forced to be masculine or macho or authoritative or all of the values that defines
Mm,
what it is to be a leader, right? For instance, when you talk about presidency, the first thing you imagine to be the president, as a lot of people would say, would be a man, because they have to be disciplined, they have to make decisive decisions and all those kinds of things that honestly is not mutually
mm-mm.
exclusive. So coming from that space and then going into Bayi, which is like an alternative space where being feminine, being a woman, um, bringing in the experiences of being a woman, like motherhood, like hating violence against women in politics, allows them to feel safe. So we have a couple of fellows who started from a position of being, for instance, anti-LGBT or having reservations at best
Mm,
because of religion. Or we had fellows because of conservative values, um, really sees the role of woman as just being a wife, right? That not that it's bad, but there are
mm,
many other options that can be explored. And then eventually, throughout the process of the three courses, them being allowed in that space and being open minded has changed those kinds of narratives. So we have a fellow, I won't name na lang, no, who was not very comfortable with LGBTQ topics, but eventually her Likambay project was to organize the LGBT community in her municipality and to pass or file at the very least the anti-discrimination ordinance. So that's a feat that we're very, very proud of, because that's not easy, right? Like, we don't want to go into echo
yeah.
chambers of the same people with the same values. We want to go to a space where there are different values, but we can come together to discuss how can we then meet the bare minimum of human rights regardless of differing opinions. So that's one. So I think I'll just end there because that was a good example.
Yeah, ang galing nun. How are you able to like foster that, no? So curious.
Mm, yeah, that's why I mentioned earlier to Albert that we really start with values first. At the end of the day, sometimes we have the same value. Like, we want what's fair and right for people. And when you strip it down to that very bare minimum, you come at the level of understanding, like putting it in the middle, that we want the same things. They might look different in the process, but at the end of the day, we want to achieve the same thing. So how do we come together to make that possible? Sometimes, as obvious as the sound is, anti-LGBT anti-LGBTQ changes and narratives that would lead to proper discrimination and stuff like that. Pero the process takes time, and it's being in that space that's not judgmental, even if they say the wildest shit. Shut up. And you're like, oh my god, whoa, and not being immediately shot for it. I think that's a good way to start. And then just constantly engaging throughout the
Yeah.
whole year, because the course is the program is like a whole year, so it takes time.
Ako, I wanna step back a bit, Ayla, and just validate lang maybe what, or I guess challenge some of what my assumptions are.
Yeah.
My understanding is Bayi focuses on advocating for women's participation in politics, in decision making, in all these areas where traditionally parang ba't ka nandyan, right?
Yeah.
Why is this still a problem? Over the past 25, 30 years, you've already had the Beijing Declaration, which is all these countries saying now, yes, we're all for women. Like, let's make the playing field level. Right? You also start to see all these boss girl narratives, sa mga movies, sa books, or wherever. And in the Philippines in particular, I think one of the things that I noticed traveling around Southeast Asia is that more than a lot of other countries I've visited, we actually make space for make a lot of space for women. But having said that, I'm not a woman. It might be my misperception. Why is this still something that we need to talk about? Why is this still a problem?
And I think that's a very fair assumption, because it is true, right? Relatively, the way the women's movements challenges are in different parts of Southeast Asia are at a dire level, where they're facing military, where they're facing extremely hostile conditions in authoritarian regimes that makes it impossible to even organize women or form an organization for women. So there's that imagery. Of course, that's very understandable that maybe it is a bit more dire in other countries, and that's a real felt feeling. But also there's recognition that in the Philippines, we do have our amazing foremothers or feminists who did their best to fight for the law, like the Magna Carta of Women, that really pushes for women's role in nation building and so on, and other laws that came after it, like the reproductive health and law. But I think one thing we need to recognize, actually two things, is that one, the patriarchal system is deeply rooted. Meaning to say that at the social, political, and economic level, although it's not as apparent as the illustrations in other Southeast Asian, it is deeply felt by a lot of women, although not recognized as a patriarchal problem. Sometimes they view it as a moral failure or just a failure in general, which I'll get back to later. But the second thing is that change should be sustained, meaning to say, even if we do a lot of laws and programs that are for women, when it is not sustained by a democracy that protects it, it can take 3 steps back even if you move 1 step forward. So what's one example, right? The reproductive health bill. It's a landmark national bill in the country, especially a Christian majority country. And now when you look at it, it has no funding. Like, there's no, the comprehensive sexuality education is there, but it's not rolled out properly. It's not discussed. So even if there are many laws that are there, programs, good efforts, amazing efforts, if it's not sustained by a democracy that allows it to thrive, it can be just a piece of paper. So going to the first part, because it is tied back, since it is deeply rooted, it takes thousands of years to undo just 100, 200, 300 years of what colonization has done for the Philippine understandings of what it is to be a woman and a man. So because it is a norm, right? It's something that's recognized as truth, recognized as an everyday reality. And if you go against it, there are many shaming, guilting ways, and also violent ways to keep that unnatural behavior back to its box, right? So it's difficult, for instance, in an economic sense, since the nuclear family is such a gender norm or required at the household level. And in that household level, there is the woman who does the nurturing, who does the home caring and all that, and the man who provides. Commonly in the situation of the Philippines, there's what we call the feminization of poverty. As soon as the husband dies, the woman who is left behind with home care has 6 children to 12 children, has no means to provide for themselves, are left at the position of virtually having to survive life with no access to a country that
Yeah.
has limited healthcare, to a country that has no food security regardless of its agricultural spaces.
Yeah.
And in the sense of the political, it's less than a quarter that are women politicians. And women politicians does not guarantee feminist politics or any policies
Yeah.
that uplift women. So, and not to mention LGBTQ people don't even have the numbers. And then, yeah, and the social encompasses both of them that drives the different norms and behaviors and attitudes towards that kind of situation.
I want to bring these big ideas down to a more
Mm.
tangible
Mm.
space. One of the things kasi that you mentioned was when it comes to the patriarchy, there are certain notions that are still tightly held
Mhm.
but not recognized as, hey, that's patriarchy at work. What would be some examples of that? Na parang, moral failing lang yan. Like what would be some examples of that?
Um, so we can go back to the family now. Let's talk about relationships. In some cultures or in some traditional thinking, and this still happens in a lot of communities, that couples or men think that it's a woman's duty to provide sex whenever it's needed. And this is a recognized truth by some women as well, that even if they have been taking care of their children since 5 a.m., working their side jobs by 1 p.m., at the end of the day, they still need to give that regardless if they do not want it. So even if they know that it feels wrong inside of them, but because society tells them that that is their obligation, they feel like they have to. And in sometimes in those spaces, we're very careful not to say that that's marital rape. Because of course, the sensibilities of the person, the way they understand, perceive their problems is to their own. But this is a patterned behavior, not just in particular situations of women. But there are research, there are data that shows that this is true. And that's the reported part of it. There's still a lot of unreported cases. So these are things that are not necessarily invisible, but is not yet questioned as an issue, even if fundamentally their bodily autonomy is being stepped on. So that's one example. There are many more in terms of economics and political, but that's like one of the more illustrative and as painful as it sounds, close to home example.
Yeah, it feels like no. It what that tells me is there's a lot of these practices na we don't get to recognize because we kind of take it for granted na. What came to mind when you were talking about si nanay takes care of the children, tas my side jobs pa and everything, is like even little things like in my kids' textbook.
Yeah, and I think it also affects men. Like, for instance, if there's that narrative that women should be the only ones who are primarily raising children, it's looked down upon when a guy is a house husband because they're not man enough to do their job. Even when it is literally, if that's what you're good at and your wife is someone who's good at working, why should it be any different if you're still doing both of your jobs as parents? But because society dictates that this is what's normal, sometimes parents find it Other people find it odd when it's just the husband taking care of the child. There's judgment on him, then there's judgment on the mother. Now, why are you not taking care of your kid?
Yeah.
You're just focused on your career. You're selfish. So that impedes in their capacity to raise a child in a loving environment just because of what other people think.
Even if I think they fill the traditional roles by choice, it I think it also affects them, how that societal narrative is being told. I can tell you, for example, that one of my learning moments was yung as haligi ng tahanan, as the breadwinner of the family. I felt like I can't complain or I can't fall apart in front of my wife about work kasi that's my duty as the husband. So parang that was something I also had to adjust to, that my wife is already looking after the household and the kids. I don't want to be one more thing that she'll have to look after. So I don't allow myself to crumble. So at least now parang we've come to a space in our relationship where I have these pre-appointed moments of, can I crumble for today and like just fall apart muna and have a mini breakdown so I can recharge for the next day. Even that, yung just keeping everything bottled in. I think this is also what fascinates me with our conversations with Jen, our conversation with you, where even even men like myself don't realize that women empowerment is also just as much about their own positionality, Jen, the term I learned from you, but it also affects how they move in their own space, and how they see themselves and how they behave.
Yeah, being aware of your positionality.
And I totally agree, because that's why we do what we do in Bayi, because it's pretty normal. Like, a lot of people, even women politicians, say that there's no problem, like the gender equality is achievable because women are not necessarily facing dire or urgent dying situations in certain areas, right? Because we don't know in other areas, like especially in geographically isolated and displaced areas, or even those that are really in conflict-ridden areas in certain parts of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao. So it takes a lot of awareness from the women politicians for some of them to recognize that this is a felt issue, and it is a community or collective approach that needs to be taken into account. And we target women elected leaders because often they have the resources and power to affect those kinds of gender norms, not just through policies, but also through the different programs and access to resources that they have. So we have fellows, for instance, that created women's shelter, women's livelihood cooperatives and centers, or even housing projects that really attest to the issues of women who face gender-based violence. Because, in data, right, like 1 in every 3 women has experienced some form of gender-based violence. And sometimes because of certain gender norms, and sometimes really material situations like economic issues, they are not able to leave those abusive relationships, or they view it as a form of love because that's what the norm tells them is love, is possessive, is chains, and all those kinds of things. So that's why we have a lot of programs about those as well.
Ayla, so you know how across the globe, right, there's a growing anti-rights movement, anti-gender movement. Like, I'm wondering what you think the consequences are if we continue to ignore this problem.
Ayoko na. I feel so strong at local levels, but like at the international, it's so bleak, because the way media portrays problems really is dire, to call for attention, to call for some form of movement forming around it, and it's very challenging what's happening in Gaza, Palestine, what's happening in the US for our um, transgender siblings and friends. So the more we try to, and I won't say ignore because I feel like we're doing our best, trying to fight
Mm.
against the tide and trying to really stick to our community and mobilize resources in a way that does not depend on funders. But as you mentioned, the more this goes on, the more work that has already been done can be undone. And even if you do have a policy, as I mentioned before, if it's just paper and they find ways to amend it, they find ways to create a counterculture against it or not put any resources at all, then it's ineffective.
Like, so it's very clear that the current situation needs to change, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of these long standing, deeply embedded issues that need to be addressed. But what then would be the alternative? Can you help paint us a picture of, I don't know, what would a truly gender equal landscape look like to you, for example?
Yes, that's a good prom question. We always ask that in our trainings. Right? Draw us an ideal world. Yeah. Um, I think and I think this is a corny but very common and makes sense kind of answer is that it's where you live in a world where um, our kind of work or NGOs like ours, women's rights organizations, cease to exist because we don't have the need anymore
Yes.
to do what we need to do. So that's one, no, that's in gender equal, where resources no longer need to go into raising awareness with men about the issues of gender based violence and why it's wrong, why consent matters, right? It's going to resources that can further aid women, for instance, in technology or whatever. But second is that gender shouldn't be an issue anymore when it comes to what people want to do. For me, that's an ideal world because my
Mm.
undergraduate thesis was about um, children's gender identity being built inside the classroom, wherein their potentials are boxed
Mm.
into the gender stereotypes that are afforded to them, such as men, young boys being encouraged more in STEM as compared to women, or even if there's a higher percentage of women in elementary and or like in primary and secondary education. When it comes to the statistics of men entering in STEM, women entering in paid care work like nursing, education, stuff like that, the disparity is still there. And sometimes these things are not what they want to do, but because they feel like they have to do it or because they think that that's the right job for them. So I think that's one scenario that I see that it these kinds of things shouldn't matter anymore. Being single at the age of 30, not having children shouldn't be an issue anymore. Um, like your romantic choices, chances, and opportunities in life, economically, politically, and socially, aren't colored by your gender anymore. So I think that's the ideal world. No, you're free to be without having to care based on your social identity.
And because
Mm.
we're talking about Bai's work in politics in particular, what would
Mm.
that particular landscape look like naman if we had more women in government, if we had more um, a spectrum of genders in decision making positions? Like, what would that look like naman?
Yeah. So, I will say na, yes, let's go intersectionality, FIF. Um, it's because of women's social positionality or because of where women were socialized to be in, the kind of role to be carrying, to be understanding of the varying needs of people aside from themselves. We have a more intersectional and caring approach of governance wherein conflicts are resolved through care, right? Because although it's not
Mm.
like women are not biologically wired to care, but because they were raised to care, these kinds of things come more naturally in approaching situations. So, what do you mean by this, right? For instance, during the pandemic, a lot of our Angat Bayi fellows, women leaders, um, were really the first to highlight the issues of gender-based violence, which we call during that time the shadow pandemic, because a lot of the barangay officers or VAUCIDAS officers were also put into the response or COVID-19 response team, leaving the women with abusive husbands
Mm.
left to fight for themselves. And those are the kind of things that are invisible at a national level. We had women who were giving birth outside of the hospital because the hospital was at capacity and no longer had space for pregnant women. We had LGBTQ individuals living with HIV who could no longer access um, medicine because of the fear of being outed because of checkpoints. So, in a feminist government or in an ideal world, all of these intersecting needs, these particular needs of minority or marginalized communities are recognized into policies, programs, and projects. And again, it isn't biologically wired in women, but because sometimes they are always assigned this role, sila yung committee on children and family, committee on persons with disability, they come to understand these kinds of situations and the particular
Mm.
needs of each marginalized community or sector.
Mhm.
So I just want to do a quick assumption check.
Mm.
That narrative of women care, men don't. Is that also just part of the prevailing narrative that we also need to question, you think?
It's not that men don't care, right? Like not me saying women care suddenly invalidates men caring. They do care, but they care in the things that they see are there or very apparent to them. And because they were raised in a world that really is, we need to put resources in the most utilitarian manner. So we need to put military to guard those people who cannot go out, right? It creates that idea of prioritizing where care goes. So it's not a matter of them not caring. And as I mentioned, these are not biologically wired. Men can also be feminist leaders. And in an ideal world of a gender equal governance or gender transformative governance, the influence of those kinds of policies and programs that would also push men into viewing about these things to care about can make those things possible. So it's not really a fight about who cares more, but it's just a recognition that some things that need to be cared about becomes invisible because of the priorities laid down by a patriarchal government. Right? So they're not the enemies,
Yeah.
it's just a matter really we need you to listen more. And some they don't. And that's the reality.
So the ask is to listen more and be offended less.
Oo, siguro, yeah.
You know what struck me with that, what struck me with your answer now, Ayla, is that phrase that you said na it's not that men don't care, it's just that they care about what they see and what's visible. And I think that's a very powerful argument for diversity as a whole, not just women in government, but like it goes back to the whether the women were raised to care or not. The fact that their context and their lived experience is different from the lived experience of men means that inherently they will see things and notice things that men don't, right? Same with other genders as well. And I think that's what's easy to misinterpret and misunderstand about diversity that I'm learning. Now it's not about United Colors of Benetton. Dapat there's one color
Yeah.
represented in every group, right? Hindi siya yung may token person ka for each, but it's really being able to bring in as many perspectives as possible so that you can understand and have this broader and complete picture of what's actually happening so that you can be more informed and make a decision as a collective. Is that an accurate way of looking at it?
Because one of the Bayi Seven Cs that we do, and we always champion this value, is to be consultative. So it's not, there's no pressure for you to know all of the problems of the world and to know the problems of each marginalized sector. Because that's some of the pressure that they do. They're like, so what? Lahat ng kailangan nila, gigive na. Tapos kami, and we're like, as tax providers, that the answer to that is yes.
Yes.
But also, it's recognizing that the solution doesn't always come from, does not need to come from only one person. Sometimes you don't need to take on the burden on yourself. If you work with a community that literally knows what they need and literally knows what kind of programs can help them, what kind of policies, then that makes the load a little bit lighter in terms of mental burden. And that's what it is, right? It's just recognizing that, okay, we need roads. Everybody needs roads. But consulting people about how do we then design that roads to serve all of the taxpayers can make a large difference. So I think Jen knows this, like for persons with disabilities. Sometimes, although they're being consulted, because sometimes it's a priority, it's a matter of prioritizing what we care about. What their need is often overlooked. So yun lang siya. It's really just, okay, listen, and then determine how can we integrate this in the design. And for some of our fellows, it comes so normal at one point or another that they talk about these things when they design certain programs and policies. So agree.
So knowing that what we want is more voices at the table, how can we then encourage, I guess, more women to step into leadership? Because as you said, it might be that the belief and the training talaga, the training ng patriarchy is so deeply embedded that they don't even consider it as an option.
So in Bayi, the way we perceive power is that there are different ways. You probably heard of this before, but there's this thing we call power within, power to, power with, and power over, power under. Of course, power over, power under are the bad things, but we believe that in every single woman or human being, there's this called power within, and it's the power that we have about our skills, our knowledge, our strengths, our weaknesses, things that are innately there or we are nurturing throughout our lifetime that we just have no confidence to exercise them. And being in a space where we allow those things to be reflected, that we have these kinds of things that we know to do, we know the needs of our indigenous women and all those kinds of things. And that it's bringing that to light and telling them we can do something about it, gives them the option of power to do something. So in one project that we have with indigenous women leaders, we have two women from Mindoro who were very clear from the onset that they were saying that we're just mothers, we're just housewives, we don't know anything about running. And eventually, throughout the courses, rather than pressuring them to, you need to run, or telling them that, but there's a problem with the patriarchy, you know best. It's just really being in that learning spaces wherein they can speak about it, name the problem, talk with confidence without being cut off, because that's one thing we have in feminist trainings, you never cut off someone. They eventually learn to build their confidence and then tell themselves that it's okay for me to see myself in that position. And we don't try to achieve that people will run immediately after the course or they will proceed to graduate from counselor to vice mayors. But it's knowing that we can dream about it, we can be there for you when you
Okay.
need to run for it. And it's an option that is always there for you. And we will support you
Mm, mm.
100%. So I think that's one way of looking at things.
That I see the how that goes back talaga to that foundational of the values that your values approach that you're talking about.
Mm-mm. And it also helps kasi when we do a fellowship, there's like 18 to 25 women there, and they are at different levels of
Mm.
governance. So they see, one, that it is a possibility. We have role
Mhm.
modeling there. But second is that these women leaders who probably, well, some of them have similar problems. Like, for instance, sometimes husbands have particular things to say about women in politics, di ba? Na, oh my God, you're a mayor, I'm a business person. Those kinds of things that need to be unpacked in a relationship. They face all of those things similarly, no? Even if, very learned na yung husband. And having that kind of
Mm.
camaraderie with each other, of understanding that I see your issue, I see that you have children, but you need to do your job sa barangay hall, or you
Mhm.
at the city hall. I see that kind of problem, that we feel guilty we can't be mothers at the same time as being politicians, or we have to choose at certain moments which one we want to prioritize. And having that community see that problem and understand that, and then find ways together, then how can we make this better, is, I think, what's really really helpful. And being able to speak about these things, kasi syempre when you're in a male dominated political space, you cannot show those issues. Like, some of our fellows would say that they would bring their children, and then the moment the child cries, everybody would look at them. So,
Okay.
parang, di ba? Like,
Mm.
parang, and then in our spaces, you can bring your child without having to worry about it. Na it's not you being about a scattered brain mom and all that stuff. So yun, that space, really, that community.
The space is just as important because then you you you're able to see role models, you're able to have support groups, and you have the safe space. Because otherwise, in the way things are now, the reality is may stigma pa rin, right? Is that's still
Yeah.
one of the things, one of the hurdles.
Mm-mm. And it's
Okay.
difficult in Philippine politics, right? Because the moment you say something personal about you, pagpepiestahan ka hard. But since this is like but since this is like a space where they're from all different parts of the Philippines, that there's level of anonymity, but there's also that level of trust. Now we promise each other to keep it within us and try to talk to it through it with each other. It helps to unload those kinds of things that they've been carrying the whole time they're alone in the city or in the LGU.
So when you say, for example, na in the political sphere, there's still that stigma. So I can't really whine about my problems as a woman. I can't naman bring my kids because then what? Like what's the next part of that sentence? Is it because then I'll be perceived as weak? Are we then training the women in politics to be as tough and macho as the patriarchy that we're trying to dismantle? Like what's that statement there?
But it is true, no? Like, women in politics are trained to be as macho as possible. Otherwise, um, people, quote unquote, will lose confidence in them. One of the reasons why one of
Mm.
the running women, wow, for presidency didn't win is because a lot of people think that the head of state should be someone who's masculine or who's strong, quote unquote,
Uh-oh.
physically, and like, that father figure who would protect you. So they are trained. Like, you cannot cry when you have a problem, even if it doesn't really mean you're weak, but because that's perceived as weak, right? Emotions are perceived as weak. Or women are viewed as, if you say something that's remotely, um, anong tawag dito? Like, contradictory to one statement, they're viewed as complaining, being emotional. And that it's similar to when you bring your children in those kinds of spaces, no? Because what do they perceive as someone who is a leader, someone who should be focused in their task alone,
Right.
someone who should not allow any distractions. So there's that pressure na it's not normalized to bring your children, not just in politics, even in work, right? Even
Yeah.
if it's a struggle by a lot of women. And we have women politicians who have husbands or politicians as well. Diba? Kasi let's be honest, a lot of women politicians also come from political dynasties. So
Family
it's
business, yeah.
Mm.
so they also have husbands who are, and they would compare their experiences that why do I why does my husband not have the same struggles as I do? Why do I have to bring my child to work and he doesn't need to? Because I feel like I need to really focus on taking care of our child. Siyempre, you want to be there for their education and stuff. And of course, biologically speaking, they're the ones who breastfeed, di ba? And there's that responsibility. Like, if you want your child to breastfeed, you have to bring them. So, that's just one aspect of the many things na um, is still complicated and not integrated into the patriarchal approach of work. Diba? The system is skewed towards women. You should take care of your children. And if you don't take care of your children as a woman politician, you fail. So you can't win. You can never win.
But
Yeah.
doesn't that also reinforce the patriarchal narrative na for you to succeed as a woman in leadership positions, you have to kind of be like a man?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And that's what we're trying to smash nga. That's why in our spaces, the women politicians are allowed to bring their children, are allowed to cry, allowed to share their emotions, allowed to be kikay or flirty as much as they want to without being judged. Because if you are, like, imagine if you are a woman mayor and you're like that, all of those things together, how do you think the LGU, your employees, and all of your constituents would view you? Diba? You're like a scandal in the making. And that's what we're trying to challenge, that it's okay to be all of those things. Even if it's not now in the outside space that we're in, at least in the space that
Mm.
you feel safe to be that, then carry, give. Yon. And that's sometimes
Mm-mm.
what they need because mentally speaking, those things require so much mental burden. Na you control the way you speak, the way you talk, and all of those things. And allowing that
Mm-mm.
reprieve or having a community support when they want to share problems of or issues na I'm running against a governor as mayor. What do you think I should do? Like asking those life decisions from other women who face the same things can really give you that support, diba? Because sometimes if you ask from other people in your same area, the answer might not be as understanding of their particular gendered issues and lens of their problems in politics.
Yeah, I think like moments in history where like si Jacinda Ardern um you know resigned from her position as the head of state of New Zealand, or as simple as Lenny being kikay with her
Yeah.
clothes during the campaign. I think parang they all contribute to um rewiring, I guess, for how we look at women politicians.
Mm,
So tama si Ayla, like maybe not like now, unfortunately, you have to like negotiate, bargain, make compromise within the space of politics, and you have to show up a certain way. But hopefully in the future, because of these little moments in history by women in power, it helps.
mm-hmm. And sometimes when you gain that kind of strength to be who you want to be in those political spaces, it becomes inspiring for other young women leaders. For instance, in our spaces now we also train to see that there's a possibility na you don't have to negotiate who you want to be, your womanhood, how you want to move, how you want to act on the basis of what's acceptable in a male dominated
Mm.
space. So we have women like that they're challenging the norm. Um and really being themselves, and that is a show of force that some women gain inspiration from. Now, okay, I'll wear shorts when I want to. Diba? You've ever seen a woman politician in shorts? Aside from the so yan. So it's what we do, gain confidence in it, and like carry it on as a movement.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
And that really drives home, no, that there's still quite a lot of work talaga that need to be done despite whatever strides we've made the past few years, no. Um, what advice would you then give to young women who might have the aspiration to lead but might feel hesitant or unsure, or they don't yet have the people around them who can nudge them forward?
Siyempre, I would tell them, approach Bayi. Talk to us. So when we have trainings, you can be part of the community. But aside from us, there are many other communities that you can gain strength from, that you can join, even the local women's organization or association in your place, at your university, or any human rights-based type of organization can be a good start, just to recognize all of these things are our rights, and all of these things we can explore regardless of one's gender. But the second thing, and this is me being inspirational, wow. I heard this from one of our counselors na sa Bayi Power Summit speech ko din siya yesterday, the other day, is that this is from Councilor Shine from Lucena City, because I'm also from Quezon Province. She said that when she ran for office as councilor, there was no woman councilor at all. And she said, why don't I try? And she just asked the simple question to a lot of us, that kung hindi ako ang tataya, sino? And I think that's what it really is. If you want to go for it, you want to chance it, you have to try it, no? To understand how it is, to feel it. And maybe you'll win. And that's what happened with Councilor Shine, because no woman has ever run for councilor there and has won. And she did. And sometimes you just need to take those kinds of chances. And if it doesn't work out, it's just really a matter of taking a step back, reflecting what kind of strategies can we implement, who can we connect with, and if there's a possibility to connect with an organization like Baichar, you go for it, right? And that's a lot of story, and that's similar to a lot of women politicians' story. Like, for example, Sandrisa ran for office twice before she won, right? So it sometimes it takes time, sometimes immediately it's there. That's what the people need. That's what the people call for. But it's taking your chances.
So since you mentioned, Ella, about connecting with Bayi, how can listeners, how can people connect with you and learn more about your work?
Well, first, we're on social media. So we're on Facebook and we're Instagram. So you can follow us at Bayi Inc. You can also check out our website at angatbayi.com. We're also on LinkedIn. Like, search us, chat us, and we will respond always. And if you have any form of partnership, any form of idea, we also engage those kinds of things and see how we can look for resources for it to make it achievable. So we also have a lot of young women leaders that we co-design things. So yeah, we partner with a lot of people. We welcome volunteers. We welcome people who are interested to get involved in project development and all those kinds of things. And of course, those who want to run for office or who want to gain transformative feminist leadership training, we always have annual call for applications, both for young women and for elected women leaders.
So we're coming up on the hour, and we've pretty much just crammed in all the other questions that we couldn't fit into a lightning round segment.
Okay.
So para maikli lang yung questions. So we'll ask you a series of questions. You can be as brief as you want. You don't have to justify your answers. But just share with us. Let's start with, what's one tool or app or resource that you can't work or live without?
I'm thinking about it. Mm, um, right now, diba, as controversial as it sounds, ChatGPT is one of the tools that I can't live without. Because sometimes I'm just so tired of thinking of an email that's friendly, and I'll tell ChatGPT especially when I'm frustrated with work and there's so many things happening, and you ask me these kinds of questions. I'm like, can you make it sound nice? So it takes off the mental burden from me to be more diplomatic, and then I'm done with it. I'm sending the email. I sound perfectly nice. We're good to go. So right now, I'm depending on her to survive, given the onslaught of projects that we have.
Who's a woman leader that you admire?
She's gonna hate me for saying this, but one of the people I admire the most is our co-founder. It's Maya. So Maya Tamayo is the co-founder and co-executive director of Bayi. And when I was first starting out, I was just a project associate or project coordinator, and she really is an example of a feminist leader that recognizes the skills and talents of people, regardless of their age, their social identity, and really nurtures that kind of growth. And that's how I view, and that's the kind of feminist leadership that we have right now in Bai, where there's no pressure if you have personal issues or you can't do a thing because of mental health issues. And that's why in Bai we're very chill. Even in like our Bai Power Summit, where some things are going like, what's happening? We're like, okay, it's fine. We're doing our best, and doing our best is more than enough. But it was successful.
Speaking of, may nakalimutan ka, Albert. What's your go-to self-care activity when work gets tough?
Funny na, as anti-feminist as it sounds. I read a lot of romance novels because, girl, like, I'm doing a lot of research. I'm reading so much data. I'm reading so much issues of women that I'm so tired of thinking about it. And when I just read romance novels, I'm like, no thoughts, just love, just just stereotypes. Being politically incorrect, so it helps rest my brain, even though there are moments where I'm like, that's wrong, and you know it, but you know. So yeah, it's funny, pagod na ako eh. Sorry, oversharing. Pero just last month of January, I read 27 romance books. That's the last I had,
Wow!
ranging from 280 pages to
So,
600 pages.
so indicator of stress levels ba yung amount of novels that you consume?
Romance novel.
Exactly. The
Okay.
most stressed I've ever been. Yeah, yan.
In
That's
in in one word, what makes for a great leader?
Ah, mm, mm, mm. Ako, reflective. Yeah, reflective.
I guess my last question here is you, because you recently had your first feminist leadership summit. Congratulations, the Bai Summit. Um, what's your key takeaway from that event?
No, when they showed the same day edit, I cried. Because we believe in ba, when one flower blooms, a whole field grows as well with them. And that's
Mm.
what we saw during that time na we started in 2018 with a couple of women leaders and just two organizations and like one founder who believed in us. And then eventually the movement happens. And it's being nurturing and caring of those relationships that you're building, because you're not just there as trainers and trainees, as women politicians and women's rights political groups, but you're also there as sisters, and as friends, understanding the personal issues of each other. So I think that was the thing that I learned, that in movement building, um, it's not just about focusing on what resources you can gain, but it's really moving together as a group, understanding your issues, and having the heart to do it together. you know the problems and it's doing action together. So yun.
Yeah.
Is that where your hope comes from and what drives you forward?
Wala na akong hope. Charot.
Kaya nga siya may romance novels na
Charot,
pagkarap.
joke lang. I think it is na even when you, not that I think it is, it really is, because when you hear the story of the women politicians in their areas, you'll hear like, you'll probably think, wow, and you're still fighting for that, and that's felt like you're so good for that, you're so amazing for that, and that's where I get straight, like if they can do it regardless of the limited resources that they have and the limited support that they have, we can do it together when we have the support of each other. So ganun siya. Sabi ko, my God, grabe yung pinagdadaanan nila. Dito tayo para sa isa't isa. So yun.
What's one message that you want listeners to remember from this conversation we've had today?
I think things that one thing that I want to close with is do things afraid and do things in spite. So do things afraid because although it is something scary, there's no way but going up, and you'll never really know what happens until you try it. And as typical as that sounds, it's so true. Like if you want to plunge and take that opportunity to try out politics or even join an organization, the worst thing that could happen is someone can say no, right? Or even if you do fail, it doesn't make you less of a person. So that's one thing. No? Kaya ako, I always apply for all of the fellowships at kahit natatanggap lang ako 2 out of 100, carry lang. Like mataas self-confidence ko, wala akong pakialam. And it's also recognizing that even if it's not for you, you are a community, and what benefits one person from the community benefits you as a whole. So it doesn't really take away from you, but it gives more to you as a whole. So ganun yung tingin ko sa mga bagay-bagay. Tas do things in spite, no? Bulat yung mata natin, gigil na tayo. Ilaban na natin sa mga bagay na makakatulong maibsan yung galit na yun, or do things in spite, or do things that can help create action against the things that you are spiteful of, or things you're angry about. So let's get to work, let's do this, let's wake up, let's get that bread jar.
So productive, not destructive.
Yeah. I mean, you can be destructive and productive at the same time, diba? You question things at the same time, you work together to answer it.
All right. Thank you so much, Ayla, for taking the time to join us this morning. And thank you also, Jen, for co-hosting this particular episode.
Drawing on Hope is a podcast by Pushpin, a social impact design agency that uses drawings and stories to help make things make sense. Follow us at Pushpin Visuals on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, or visit www.pushpinvisuals.com. Thanks for listening, and remember, hope isn't something we wait for, it's something we create.